Welcome everyone. Welcome to Unlocking Math Success, Cracking the Code webinar. We're going to be talking about math programs, reform, how to boost math outcomes for students. It's a very, very hot topic right now because I think a lot of schools and districts are struggling with this. Also, I do want to mention it is Women in STEM Month, March, so we have a few more days left in March, and I do think that math is a real big part of that, right? If you look at rates today, I think in bachelor's degrees in STEM, only 20% of graduates with bachelor's degrees are women. And I think a lot of what's happening is it really starts in K-12 school, and especially at middle school, where you see a big drop in girls' interest in math. And so hopefully today's webinar will also work towards providing more equity for women. All right. So today's agenda, we have an action-packed agenda. We're going to be doing one slide on who we are, let's go learn. And then we're also going to be talking about baseline factors and why math performance is low. And then I'm going to be going over some case studies of what some other school districts have done to overcome low math outcomes. And then I'm going to be doing a system demo. So I'm going to go fast, and we'll have time for a Q&A in the very end as well. And so it's going to be hopefully exciting. And don't worry, since again, it'll be recorded, so that's why I'm going to go extra fast, because if you need to, you can always look at the recording. All right, who is Let's Go Learn? So I founded Let's Go Learn in 2000 with Dr. McCollum. He ran the Reading Credential program. And at the time, we started one of the first computer adaptive assessments before that term even existed. And our initial assessment that launched ran on a modem, right? So it was really important back in those days to keep things very, very tight because their bandwidth wasn't so good on the internet. And then our really guiding principle was to make sure that people understand students are not single scores. We need to have lots of diagnostic data. How can we give good data to teachers to lower the threshold for them to personalize? And that's been our guiding principle all along, right? We want data that really informs learning for teachers. Okay, so the first factor I want to talk about is to understand that modern math content is broad. Now, if you look at this picture, it's a little overwhelming. What we see over here is on the left is grade level. K, 1, 2, 3 goes all the way up to 7th grade. And then each one of these, this is strands, numbers in operation, measurement, data analysis. Now, each one of these little lines you see is a skill or concept that needs to be taught. So when you look at this in its entirety, you realize modern math standards, there's a lot to it. There's a lot that needs to be covered, and that is the first factor that needs to be understood and embraced, right? I think a lot of times math departments don't always understand, or they understand this, but they don't realize realistically this has implications on how you teach. Okay, so let's start with that. And the problem with it being so broad and rigorous is that it doesn't leave a lot of time for review. All right, the next factor is that upper grade level or grade level conceptual mastery requires foundational skills, right? Math is like a foreign language. I love this slide because people think, well, someone's in 6th grade math, but you would never put a student who is at level 1 French into a level 3 class, right? You say, oh, they got to go back and finish level 1 if they don't understand the concepts, and then they build it up. Math is really like a foreign language, and I think this is something, again, that we have to accept and embrace when we had discussions within our organizations about how do we reform this. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is that math skills, right? So when you take math skills, conceptual understanding, that leads to conceptual mastery. And we need to differentiate between conceptual mastery and conceptual understanding. By middle school, a lot of the middle school students have been exposed to concepts. They have an understanding of capacity, but they don't quite have mastery until they combine the skills. Like they need to know the area of a triangle, they need to know the area of a circle. If they don't combine all this, they will never be able to get total conceptual mastery, okay? Now, what happens is when you look at it today, a lot of students who are behind, like if you're a school district where you have 17 to 30% proficiency in mathematics, around 6, 7, 8, this is what your students' skills look like, their skills gaps. They have lots of these little gaps, and it limits the ceiling at which they can arrive at, right? And so again, I love this slide because it really sort of visualizes how math is built on itself and how these different pieces hook together. All right. The third factor I think is really important to understand. Again, when you have a school district where you have, this is an example of like a 30% proficient school district or school. And when you look at the students, 30% means that 14 to 70% of your kids are actually on grade, 20, 25 are within a year below, and 50 to 60 are 2 or more years below. So in order to get these students up to speed, you have to have a 5x to 10x accelerated instructional rate. Because if you don't push them up, then what happens is their slope of learning is low. So when students, by the time they reach 6th grade, if they're behind, the slope of learning decreases so that they're only getting a half a year in a year's gain. And 6th grade is actually less than that. Okay, so again, this is something that's really important to understand. If you want to intervene, you have to have an acceleration rate that's very, very high. Otherwise, you can never catch up. Now, the fourth factor I'm going to point out is that there's no easy grouping. A lot of times you think, oh, I'll have a intervention group and I'll just pull all the kids who are struggling and put them into a group. Well, this is 5 typical students in I can't remember, it's a 5th or 6th grade class. And these are real data. We just randomly grabbed 5 students and put them in here. And what we're looking at is this is the grade range of the skill or concept being taught, right? 0 through 8th grade. And each one of these is a sub-test in math. So these are numbers in operation, measurement, data analysis, geometry, and algebra. Now, this is why it's very tough. If I were a teacher, I know N8 here is fractions. I have students who have a 2nd grade level of fractions and some 6.5. Very hard to make grouping with that. Another one over here is place value, 2nd grade up to high 5th grade. Here's one thing where it's very clustered, right? But that's probably a really high level concept that they haven't started teaching yet. But again, you see this. This is something that you have to accept. It is very difficult to do small group instruction because the students' skills are so varied, and it's very hard to find a clustering of students. I'd say in reading it's a little easier, and sometimes we have this concept that, oh, small groups work in reading, let's just do it in math. It is more difficult. Okay, so conclusion real quickly, math standards are very broad. By middle school, many students have significant gaps, right? And the gaps aren't just, they're really all over the place. Conceptual understanding is different from conceptual mastery, right? It's important to realize that. And the final thing is accelerated intervention is needed to get students to proficiency. You really have to go for acceleration. Now, what are some schools doing? So I'm going to give you some examples of what some school districts out there are doing. So first one is Ridley. What they did was their background is they had consistently low scores in math, very low proficiency, and they wanted to really test this out. So the first thing, also the other background is they have intense pacing guides, like most school districts do, right? We have an intense pacing guide. How do we go ahead and make sure that we could stick to that guide and cover all the content we need to? They were not able to introduce intervention to their class. Okay, so what is the solution? They added a 7th period, a personalized learning period. And not everyone used it for math, but a lot of them did. And that way, they put them on a separate period. They got the intervention they needed. And they actually completely turned around their school district and their scores. And they used our math program. So they actually used our personalized LGL Edge, Math Edge, which creates a custom course for each student. Downey. Again, same thing, middle school, consistently low math scores, intense pacing guide, not able to introduce intervention. So what did they do? They used extra PE hours for math intervention. They asked teachers on their extra study period, or their open period, can you have kids come in and work on the computer while you do your regular work, and just sort of monitor them. So they used students who already had mastered had enough PE hours. They took those kids out once they fulfilled those, and they put them into this extra intervention. And teachers were paid extra in order to have these students help monitor them. And again, they also used our Math Edge. And they had some pretty amazing gains too. So the principal and vice principal over there really were very visionary. Montebello, this is another interesting case. Low overall math scores. They didn't really have a strong pullout, so that wasn't really so much of an option. But they did have a strong federal program department. So what they did was they targeted the students who were near proficient, and they put them into summer school. And it was 2 summers, and it was pretty amazing. It was intense 14-day summer school. And normally I would say that's not really enough time, but they actually end up getting 0.25 to 0.35 years of gain in math in 14 days over 2 summers for 500 kids in each summer program. That's pretty incredible. Think about that. That's over almost a quarter of a year to a third of a year gain in 14 days, right? So that was pretty intense. And of course, they used our Math Edge program. But in theory, it's not only our program. It's the idea is you find the gaps, you target it, and you do it. It's pretty incredible. Oh, actually, it's 450 students. Okay, so here's another one. This was a continuing education high school. I thought this was interesting. Resort-oriented math department head by Dr. Smith. Students were not going to graduate. Principal allowed the teachers to run with it. So they really took the ball and said, hey, this is what we want to do. And so in a continuing education school, what's happening is really by that point, the students aren't going to graduate. So they say, hey, they send them to the continuing ed high school, and you talk to them and you get them motivated, hopefully. And what they did was they assessed them with our assessment, which is a pre-algebra assessment. And they really sat down and talked to each student and said, hey, look, this is where you're at. This is what you need. If you want to graduate, we need to work on this really hard. And they did a credit recovery for so many lessons, gave them credit, right? Now, what they did was they actually used multiple programs. They had a program, Exact Path, and they used that for the kids who were near grade level. And then they used LGL Math Edge for the students who were really far behind. And most of the kids were far behind. But like I said, so they really relied on Math Edge for those students. And what they found for those students who were really far behind, that they got proficiency within 2 months once the student decided to work hard. Okay, so I do have to give that caveat. They did have to get them motivated, and Dr. Smith and team were really good at figuring out how to get the students motivated. So, okay, so let me move on. Here's another school district. 0% proficiency in middle school math. So all the students, they literally had 0. Students were totally lost in the math curriculum. Teachers and principals recognized the situation. And what do? They got permission to drop their standards-based core curriculum. And they flipped the classroom. And everyone worked on a personalized learning program. Teachers rotated in small groups. But of course, this was a lot of PD. They had to get them some data. They had to get them to really flip the classroom and have a program that they could work on. And the teachers need to know how to do small group instruction, right? But I think that's really smart, because why stick with this core material if all of your kids are behind? When you have 0% proficiency, remember, those students are 2 or more years behind, right? So they're really far behind. That's like French 1 kids going into French 3, right? All right. Let me go ahead now and show you guys a little bit about our, actually, I'll give a couple more slides and I'm going to jump into the demo. Look at time, we're still good on time. Okay, so what is Let's Go Learn? We have an online platform. We have precision diagnostic assessments right here. And those precision assessments are given to the students, and then it drives into our engine, and that engine creates a personalized course for every single student, right? And that course fills the gaps. The teachers can also use the data for small group instruction, like I said, or also you can use it to assign individual lessons based on the teacher, what they think is necessary to the students. Okay, so the diagnostic model assessment. So this is one of the really, really key differences to Let's Go Learn. Our assessments are based on a diagnostic model. And so what that means is, even if the student's in 4th grade, we're going to go all the way down to K. We're going to go all the way up if they're advanced. We go up and down to find their exact present level, and then we give them instruction right above that present level. And then we also break math into 44 subtests. So this is very key. Most people don't break math into this detailed. They're really using strand scores to try to create a personalized learning course, which really does not work. If I say that you're in numbers and operation, you're at 4.5 or 726, as a teacher, I don't know what that means, right? In ours, everything means something. So let's take a look at this place value. Here's this one student. They're right about high 3rd grade / 4th grade in place value. What does that mean? If we were to look at the reports, this is how you teach the scope and sequence of place value. Oops, sorry. 1s and 10s, 1 cents, hundredths, thousands, expanded form. This student has all these skills mastered. And next, what they need to work on in 10,000, 100,000s, and millions, and then decimal place value. So this is where the student is at, and this is what I need to teach next, right? Very clear and actionable. But this could only be achieved by a diagnostic model of assessment. Benchmark tests that are using item analysis to predict a score will not do this. Okay, and as a matter of fact, I would argue statistically, it's really sort of unethical to use some of those type tests to try to place a course for a student who is many years below, right? If you're within grade level, yeah, it's okay. Okay, we're talking about math today, so I'm going to skip that slide. So let me go ahead and jump into a demo here. So I am logged into an account right now, and we see, let's go over and take a look at our data. Now this is a demo account. We have live data from real students, but the names have all been obfuscated. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. And what we see here is this is sort of typical of an assessment. You see total score, numbers and operation, measurement, data, geometry, algebra, right? These are some different scores you see, but we break our system to more. We don't just do this general score. So like, look, if I want to look at numbers and operations, I click on numbers and operations, and now we break it into numbers, place value, ordering and comparing, addition of whole numbers, subtraction of a whole number. We break it down into the granular details, and each one of these scores, which are grade level scores, are tied to a skill and concept. So if I want to take a look at place value, I click on that. Now here's my class in place value. These students have mastered place value. These students here, George, Mary, and Carl, are working on 2 digits, right? 1s and 10s. And then it goes up to the scope and sequence. These students right here, they're working on decimal place value. This is the value of having granular, actionable data driven by a precision diagnostic assessment, okay? Honestly, the only assessment out there that does it at this level is ours right now, right? Unless it's the teacher who's doing it, because the teacher is a go-getter and they know how to assess this kind of stuff, right? Maybe through a CBM system. Okay, so that's a piece of it. Let me show you what it looks like when you look at a report. If I want to look at Benjamin's report, if I just do the summary report, Benjamin is actually in 8th grade. Now here we see all the different areas within numbers. Where is he at? He has a maximum score. Benjamin can correctly round to the nearest tens, hundreds, and thousands, right? Place value. Benjamin can identify thousands, 10,000, hundred thousands, and millions. So he needs a little bit of work there. He needs to work on the next skill up, which I think is decimal place values. But this is the summary report for Benjamin, right? The red arrows tell you where you need to work. Those are below grade level. So very, very discrete. So now let's take a look at a detail report. So if you look at a detail report, this actually is like 15 pages. It breaks it all out. And this actually shows the full scope and sequence of each subtest, right? So if you look at it within percentages, right? This is where he's working at right here. Benjamin will convert percentages to decimal. That's what the skill they're working on next. And then after that, there's another area. So very, very detailed. Now, the reason why we're also used quite a bit in special education, and I don't know if you noticed it before, but we had that special education endorsement, is because, let's see here. We have this one report right here, and this is an amazing report. This is used for writing IEPs. So if you say, okay, I'm going to focus on numbers and operations. Today, initially, I want to see what can Daryl do. So his present levels. Daryl can correctly round to the nearest tens, hundred thousands. Daryl can identify thousands, 10,000, 100,000 place values. So this is his present level, clearly defined by data, no guesswork. What do I work on next? Let's take a look at the skills, refresh, and then I would train the teachers to say, okay, let's probably target fractions and division, because it looks like he's okay in multiplication, but he's a little low in fractions, 3.6. So I would target these 3.6 grade level 3 skills and concepts. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I concentrate on those 5 skills next. So that's my short-term objectives, right? And that's pretty incredible. So this is really a once special ed departments see this, it's a no-brainer for them. Now the instruction, the way it works, music is based into our instruction, very engaging, great for students, especially students who are at risk. If I want to go ahead and take a look at upcoming lessons, you could see exactly this student needs 2 3rd grade lessons, about 5 4th grade lessons, a bunch of 5th grade lessons. And this is why you can get those 5x to 10x acceleration rates, because we exactly find out what the kid needs to work on, the student. And by not wasting our time by placing someone in a linear single strand of instruction, we efficiently and surgically tell them what do they need to do, and this gets them up to speed very, very fast. All right. That's really all I have time for. Today I hope you could sort of see, what are some of those big things you need to work on. And let me go ahead and do this here. Oh, okay, actually, one more thing before I wrap up and take some questions. I do want to point out, this is sort of interesting. This is where you really need granular instruction to get acceleration. So a lot of programs out there, they're using these scaled scores that are strand-based, like 745. And they're trying to say, based on 745, they're trying to place students within all of these lessons, which really doesn't work, all right? So anyway, okay. So conclusion, I like saying this, don't be a statistic, right? Become an outlier by doing something different, right? If you need to change your model, right? Don't just go with the flow and say, oh, everyone needs to follow their pacing guide, 5th grade math, 6th grade math, 7th grade math, 8th grade math. If you do that, you're never going to catch up. Also, the reality is a core program, their differentiation is not going to work. A lot of core programs say, oh, we have a Friday piece you can break out, or it's scaffold so you can teach the kids. That's not going to work. If you are at the 17 to 30% proficiency level at your school, you cannot rely on the core breakout. You need to go to something more aggressive, all right? Okay, so develop your model. What is your model? Meet with your teachers. Talk about these factors and say, what can we do to really change things? Okay. Use technology to your advantage. I do feel like technology is amazing today, right? The stuff I showed you that we have in the instruction we have, it is amazing what you can do with the diagnostic assessments that are precision-based. So don't get fooled, okay? Don't use a screener. A screener or a benchmark test cannot drive personalized learning. Now, if you combine it maybe with your teachers who know how to use data, then you could do it, or you use some kind of assessment like ours. But it's important to, use the proper technology, right? I think math is ideal for personalized learning, right? I know we have concerns about putting kids on the computers, but you know what? Math, kids' skills are so fragmented, it's really perfect for that. All right, here we go. If you want to talk to one of our educational consultants, depending on what state you're in, go ahead and scan that. My email address is there as well. If you want to chat, if you have questions, I'm happy to always talk. I could always squeeze in, a half hour or whatever in any given week. So we really want to help you be partners for long-term success. All right, let's take a look at some of the questions. Oh, a lot of great questions. So let me see here. Okay, does your software provide a way to compare your scores to state proficiency scores? Yes, we do have a proficiency report that will actually tell you whether your student is going to be proficient. So there is a report. It's a data portal report, so it's going to be more for site administrators or district administrators to run. All right. How do you get a more detailed look? How can I get a more detailed look through your demo account? So if you sign up for or contact us with scan or email me, we actually have a sandbox account, the account I actually use. So you actually can log into it and you could poke around. So it's a nice tool to look at because it's nice to look at real data. All right, does your software generate reports for parents? Yes, those reports that I showed you, the detail report, they're all written in everyday language, right? So we're not trying to be too technical, although if you say decimal place value, they need to know what it is. So those are reports that are used by parents. And we do have some videos that you could forward to parents to tell them how to read the reports. Now, can you export data as goals or evidence for IEPs? So yes, you can. I didn't even show you, but we have a great progress monitoring tool where, I didn't even talk about progress monitoring. Oh my God, our progress monitoring is amazing. When you have that baseline assessment, I'm just going to describe this to you. If you give any quiz, so if I give a decimal place value quiz and the student passes it, it creates a new high point on the place value subtest that recalculates your numbers and operation scores and recalculates your total score. So anytime you give a quiz, after you've done your baseline assessment, you have a rolling growth monitor so that you can use that as evidence of growth. Now, same thing with the edge usage. If they're doing instruction, you can export that out because every lesson has a score. So yeah, we will give you rock solid progress monitoring for compliance and IEPs, right? So just so you know, it's really, really cool. How does your Math Edge program work better? And is it, and I'm sorry, can't read properly. Why does your Math Edge program work better than other programs that are out there? Okay. You saw all that granular data I talked about, the 44. That is why our Edge program is better. Because do you want to place your students into instruction based on 5 scores or 1 score? Actually, there are some programs out there that use a single score to place kids into instruction. That is criminal, in my point of view. That is criminal if the student is far below. If they're within grade level, maybe it's not a big deal. 5 scores? 44 scores? Yes, that's what you want. Okay, that's why it works better. How did that math department implement an extra period? All right, so the first year they used our Adam assessment, they tested all their kids in middle school. They shared the data with their math team. Then they said, what can we do? They came up with a solution of adding the 7th period. So it wasn't something the district administrators just did. They shared the data. They had a discussion. And then the teachers agreed to implement an extra period, right? They shortened every period by 5 minutes, and they carved out those 5 minutes and made it, I think it was a little bit shorter, the actual 7th period. And that became the intervention period for everyone. Okay, we have a couple more minutes. How does your math PD work for middle school? Okay, so I showed you a lot, but we chunk it into very simple things. So first training is, how do I assess my kids? Really, you can do it in 30 minutes, but we have an hour training so teachers know how to queue up and assess them. After everyone's been tested, we have a data analysis training session. So the training happens after the first testing window. We show the teachers how to do it. Now, we may break that training into one training for special education teachers, maybe another training for interventionists, and maybe another training for regular classroom teachers. Or you can combine it, but it depends. Again, you want to give everyone exactly what they need to operationalize it for themselves, okay? And then the next training might be, if they're using Edge, how do I monitor Edge and make sure my kids are using it properly, which is the instruction. And then later on, we also will have trainings with principals if there's principals who want to do some kind of looking at the data. And another training would be for PLCs. If you have grade level teachers who want to analyze the data, our PLC data is unreal. Unreal. It's amazing data. Okay. Looks like I have 1 more minute. How long does it take a student to complete the initial test? Okay. So the assessment's going to take 10 to 15 minutes for a kindergartner. A middle school, hour and a half. So it depends. If you're using the pre-algebra assessment, it's a little lower. It might be 45 minutes to an hour. The Adam assessment is more a longer one. But again, it is adaptive. Now, every time someone takes the test later on, it is faster. Because once we have data on the student, we can more efficiently do follow-up assessments. Also, you can start and stop the assessment, so they don't have to do it in one sitting, right? But anyway, that's it. How long would it take for schools to get up to speed using LGL? I think that question I sort of really added. Again, it's not hard. You can get up to speed in one training to use the system, and then we chunk it out. We do like to do a training ahead of time with the administrators and maybe your math departmental leaders to get them to understand what we do and also to hook it into any current math initiatives you may have. All right, that's it. We're out of time. Thank you so much. Go ahead and scan that if you want to talk to one of our ed consultants, and we will be emailing you probably tomorrow or Monday with the recording and the slides. All right, thank you so much.